My favourite newspaper published an article about Kimberlé Crenshaw, the lady who coined the term intersectionality, and they gave us some fantastic information from the horse's mouth about the origins of the term and the, I guess we'll call it lens, the philosophy of intersectionality. And I really think it's worth sharing with you because it's really important to understand the mindset of the people who are espousing this worldview and why the Conservatives in the UK and Donald Trump are actually in open opposition to this now. And in fact, this is one of the reasons that this article was done and this interview was made. Because as you can see there, Kimberlé Crenshaw, the woman who revolutionized feminism and landed at the heart of the culture wars, from police brutality to sexual harassment, the lawyer fights to ensure black women's experiences are not ignored. So why are her ideas being denounced? The easy answer is her ideas are being denounced as racist because she herself is a racist. In a big volume that I actually don't have in the office with me, called Critical Race Theory, a collection of the most influential essays, or something of that sort, compiled by Crenshaw herself, she writes a nice big foreword in which she explains that the purpose of intersectionality, and critical race theory particularly, is the raising of racial consciousness. Now, one might say, that sounds bad. That sounds like the sort of thing that the Nazis did with the Germans. And you'd be right. That's exactly it. Raising racial consciousness is the very root and heart, the beating heart of racism. And that's what Kimberlé Crenshaw is promoting, which is why people like myself, people who are individualistic liberals, look at her and think, massive racist. And she shows us this literally in the first paragraph. It's actually kind of comical to see the way that they view themselves. And what's interesting are the, dare I say, intersections of how this matches in with other momentous political events that are carrying on here. They say, it was October 1991, and Anita Hill was testifying against Clarence Thomas. At the judge's US Supreme Court confirmation hearing, Hill, his former aide, claimed he had sexually harassed her. Kimberlé Crenshaw was assisting Hill's legal team and felt dejected and exhausted. After she left the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. that day, she saw a group of African Americans, mostly women, gathered at the bottom of the steps in a prayer circle. She let out a sigh of relief and walked towards them. What must she have been thinking? I see a group of black people, mostly women, and she must have been thinking something like, they have my skin color, therefore they must feel as I do. They must think as I do. Now, personally, I would consider that to be, well, probably the height of racism. That to me seems quintessentially racist. You are the same race as me, therefore you must be philosophically like me, you must be emotionally like me, and therefore I can just do as, in fact, she says in the next paragraph. I thought, oh, thank God, a place where we can go and embrace each other because this is a struggle. Now, I assume that she means being around white people is a struggle, and having seen a group of black people, she thinks, great, I can go over to this group of black people and be accepted and be embraced because I am also black and they are black and therefore all the black people will be together. Again, this just strikes me as racism. But anyway, it was the day before Thomas's confirmation and she felt the future of the civil rights movement was on the line. I think really the civil rights movement began with the Republicans, and I thought Thomas was a Republican. So I don't see where the civil rights movement is going wrong here. I think really it's the end of the Democrats' involvement in the civil rights movement that's on the line, isn't it? But when she reached the group, she saw that they were wearing t-shirts proclaiming their support for Thomas. She watched in dread as they sang songs of praise and called Hill a Jezebel. Quote, it was like a horror film. You think you're safe, but it turns out that the people you're running to are actually infected with whatever you're running from. That's mad. I just find that mad. Obviously presupposing that all black people think alike and they're all on the same team, and if they're not, they are, quote, infected with something. They are diseased. How is this not, though, the KKK's narrative? How is this not like the narrative of white supremacists, active white supremacists, who openly say, we are white supremacists, and we think all black people are the same, they're all, this, that, and the other. How is it not the same? And she's shocked to find, well, actually, here's a group of black people who are partisan and opposed to me on various political and ideological grounds. How does she not assume that there would be black people who think like this? I guess she would say that they were some variant of race traitors, to put it as politely as I can. But this, I think, gives us a fairly open view of how she sees the world. She thinks that all black people should be on her side, and presumably all women too, and that's where the intersections come in. But anyway, from this experience of having assumed a group of black people were on her side, only to find that they actually supported the black man that she was in opposition to, she says, as she walked away from them, she thought about how the case exposed the theoretical gap in the legal profession when it came to black women's lived experience. What? What does that mean? Like, the theoretical gap in the legal profession when it came to black women's lived experience. So she, as a lawyer and a black woman, expected all black people to be on her side, and she found that some black people were not on her side, and this is a theoretical gap in the legal profession. I don't think that many theorists have actually said that all black people have exactly the same opinions on things, and any of those legal theorists that did, like her, I think that the problem isn't actually the problem of the legal profession, it's their theoretical position on these things. But again, it seems to have been her racist assumption that she's projected onto the legal profession that reality has just demonstrated wasn't true. During the explosive hearing, The Guardian continues, televised and watched across the country, Hill, then a teacher at the University of Oklahoma's law school, spoke in great detail of her allegation that Thomas harassed her when he was the supervisor at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, yet he retained tremendous support, and in his infamous defense, he called the hearings a high-tech lynching. But that's only because there were, I think it was literally a dozen women who also worked around Thomas Clarence, who said they hadn't seen anything of the sort, nothing in their experience, not a rude comment, not a wrong, sly word or anything like that, had been directed against any other woman, and so these allegations were deemed as not credible and with no evidence to support them. So it would seem that from a neutral, reasonable outsider's perspective, that I would suggest that I might be representing here, that justice was done. A false allegation was denied, and this seems to have been based on politically partisan lines because he was going to be confirmed to be a Supreme Court justice, and this was obviously an attempt to stop that. And without any proof behind it, I can see why he would call it a high-tech lynching, frankly. But what Crenshaw saw was that with feminists supporting Hill and anti-racist activists defending Thomas, twin calls for equality were being put into opposition against each other. The groups were weakening each other's movements instead of supporting each other's cause, and it was black women who paid a significant price. You mean the person who made false allegations against Thomas was a black woman, and because other black women were supporting Clarence Thomas, this is meant to be some kind of contradiction. I don't agree that what happened to Clarence Thomas was a call for equality. I don't know why you would frame it that way. I mean, if you were accusing someone of having sexually assaulted you, this would be a call for justice. A false one, it appears, given how things worked out. And for some reason, Crenshaw has then dichotomized blackness with womanliness and decided there is some kind of conflict there based on her prior racial assumptions. But there isn't a dichotomy here. Neither of these things are actually based on being black or being a woman. Thomas was falsely accused. He was then confirmed as Supreme Court Justice. Where's the conflict? He had supporters on both sides and accusers on both sides who were both black and women. This is not about, I don't know, this kind of activism that she's trying to portray as. Unless, of course, she is actually saying that identity activism, as in black or woman or whatever the identity is inherently opposed to the course of justice, and justice itself being served is a form of oppression and division for these movements, which I'm not saying that's necessarily what she's saying, but honestly, that's kind of the impression that I'm getting, that the identity movements that she's been promoting are actually opposed to justice as we would understand justice, people getting what they deserve. As The Guardian carries on, for Crenshaw, who is now one of the most influential black legal feminist theorists in the US, Hill's case cemented her idea of intersectionality set out in 2 papers before the hearing. The idea suggests that different forms of discrimination, such as racism and sexism, can overlap and compound each other in just this way. But that didn't happen. If anything, you could have argued that maybe it was, they don't state in this Guardian article, but maybe they're saying, well, Clarence Thomas was only accused because he was black and a man. That's obviously not where she's going with it, but the point is, she's making this up. There is no particularly like a non-intersectional reading of the circumstance sees this as just being normal and have justice having been done. At the time of Hill's case, Crenshaw was writing another paper called Mapping the Margins on the erasure of black women's history of being sexually harassed and abused. Hill's case showed the direct result of the fact that sexual harassment had largely only been discussed in relation to white women. But there was no sexual harassment, unless you're going to assume that Hill is telling the truth and there is a giant white supremacist conspiracy that is opposed to having that done. And then she goes on to tell us about how there were 700,000 slaves in 1790. By the eve of the Civil War, there were nearly 4 million. How did that happen? It was right in front of us because of all the institutionalized sexual harassment and abuse that the black women who were slaves suffered. But that's not a secret. I mean, in English public schools, I learned about that. About the fact that obviously there was a huge amount of, the slave owners would rape the women they had as slaves. One of the many reasons that slavery is bad, incidentally. This is not a secret at all. But I guess it's being erased because we're not constantly making a big deal out of it, maybe? In the 30 years since Crenshaw first wrote about intersectionality, the term has swept to the forefront of conversations about feminism and racial justice. It is used by activists in HR training in some of the world's largest corporations. And here you see the flex. They're saying, look at how far we have come with what I would suggest is a manifestly and demonstrably racist ideology, from her own words. And this success, of course, is, as they say, at the heart of the right-wing backlash against identity politics. Because there's only right-wingers who are concerned about identity politics. There are no people on the left who are saying, well, actually, maybe these racial and gendered identity politics are divisive and are actually destroying our movement, and maybe even destroying the West as we know it. But hey, at the end of October, the term critical race theory was spoken about in the UK Parliament for the first time when Kemi Badenoch, a black woman, a conservative black woman, the Equalities Minister, announced that the government was unequivocally against fundamental parts of the concept, which is completely salient and sane. You would expect that if this is a philosophical proposition that is being put across, and there are different ways of looking at the situation, especially if you are an individualist liberal, that you would obviously and demonstrably object to the assumption that this is racism or sexism when you can see through the procedure that there is no evident racism and sexism being portrayed. So it's good that Donald Trump has signed his executive order banning critical race theory from the federal government and other companies that are contracted by the federal government. And it's fantastic that the conservatives over here will also denounce and stand unequivocally against it. If they would then use their massive majority to take action against critical race theory and defund it over here like Donald Trump did, that would be even better. But until that happens, I'm going to give them, a B. In September, Donald Trump ordered federal agencies to stop racial sensitivity training, quote unquote, labeling it divisive anti-American propaganda, which it is. Crenshaw is happy to have the fight and point out how absurd this argument is. So what you are saying, what you are saying American is having structural racism. No, Kimberlé. What they are saying is the procedures that America has that make up the complex structure that is the Republic is not predicated on race. And so it doesn't act through the medium of race, and so any conclusions that you reach from it are not based on race, and this is how the liberal, individualist, constitutionalist Enlightenment view comes to the conclusion that America is not a racist country, and that your engagement with the system is more likely to determine your outcomes. But she says, if contesting racism is un-American, then you are basically witness to my side. You are confirming why this work is so important. No. You are just a racist in and of yourself, and the people who are defending the United States are saying this is not a racist system, and what you want is actually a form of racism. You want open discrimination based on race, you want advantages and various kind of, racial caste system, really, is what she would end up be arguing for, that would advantage black people and presumably women and trans people and other intersectional minority groups, or that are concerned with by intersectionality. She would be suggesting that these people need special treatment, which is a form of new aristocracy. Why on earth wouldn't we have an equal treatment across the board? Unsurprisingly, Crenshaw backed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the election, so she was definitely confirmed as black. You don't have to describe Biden and Harris as being heaven in America to oppose the hell of the Trump administration. Well, more proof that Trump was doing the right thing if these are the people, she's the kind of person that he's really annoying. If people are just openly racist and want to, as she says, quote, raise racial consciousness, are offended by the Trump administration's lack of raising of racial consciousness, that's good news. In a statement, she described their win as a historic night, thanks to Harris becoming the highest-ranking woman in U.S. history, as well as the first black person and the first Indian American to become vice president. Wow, she certainly checked off a lot of those boxes, didn't she? Crenshaw noted that Biden's victory speech thanked the African American community, writing, "We must hold him to that promise. We must move forward intersectionally and with an eye towards our past." That's right, we must move forward looking backwards. That makes sense, doesn't it? What an awful and just disgraceful worldview that she's promoting. But at least you know where they stand. The intersectionals, the people who are open racists, who want to keep looking at America's past and never moving forward into the future, they vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Anyway, folks, if you would like more content from us, you can go to lotuseast.com, where you can become a premium member and sign up to all of our wonderful premium content. The next book club that we're going to be doing, and this is one of my favorite parts of the website, is going to be, in fact, something relevant to this, The Rule of Law by Lord Tom Bingham, talking about the origins of the US constitutional and legal systems, how they developed, why they developed, and why it's not really appropriate to call them racist. Although he doesn't expressly say this, I think, but you'll understand why that's the conclusion that we'd come to, or at least I've come to, after I do the book review. See you on the site.